Duke Nukem 3D World Tour is a 2016 port of the classic first-person shooter Duke Nukem 3D, released for the game's 20th anniversary with some additional content. And while I never played the original game, I had an absolute blast with this title, and it was 100% worth the $2 I paid for it on sale. I honestly don't have a lot to compare this game to, as I haven't played a ton of shooters from the time era of the original release, but I definitely see why this game blew up like it did, as it was very innovative and a pioneer into expanding first-person shooters. Comparing it to other shooters of this era I've played, like Medal of Honor, Quake, Super 3D, Noah's Ark, or Doom, 3 of those 4 games have a very serious tone, with Noah's Ark being the odd one out, and all 4 being a lot more simple in design compared to Duke, being largely just boots on the ground with more simple and/or realistic weapons, like real-life guns or the slingshots of Noah's Ark. Duke definitely stood out to me from these, having only a semi-serious tone with toilet and adult humor and Duke's various one-liners in general, which probably directly or indirectly would help influence other semi-serious games down the road, like Lollipop Chainsaw, Rock of the Dead, or the lesser-known Zombie Admin. And while the other 4 shooters I mentioned largely just kept you limited to solid ground, Duke had underwater sections and parts where you got to fly around in a jetpack. I can imagine a jetpack in an FPS left many gamers in awe back in the late 90s. And this title had a hefty weapons variety for the time, holding 10 guns in the original release, with this re-release having 12, versus the OG Doom having 9 or Wolfenstein 3D's 4 weapons. And all of the weapons in the game all feel notably different and unique, in addition to having their own distinct looks. The machine pistol, while weak, looks very unique compared to pistols in other shooters, and is good for destroying alien eggs and the Slimers, in addition to being a weapon when you want to shoot exploding barrels or press a button from a distance while trying to conserve your more useful ammo. There was also the iconic Duke Nukem shotgun, my primary weapon for most of the game, as it packs a punch, has a wide blast radius, and long range, and of course the chain gun, in addition to various explosive weapons. The pipe bombs, RPG, Devastator weapon, great for bosses, and tripwire bombs. And finally, the more sci-fi-ish wonder weapons, the shrink gun, which shrinks most aliens and allows Duke to step on them, and if shot into a mirror, can be used to make Duke small to access certain areas. There's also the expander, which makes enemies explode by, well, expanding them, although it really wasn't that useful. And the final weapon of the base game, the freeze gun, allowing you to freeze aliens and make them a one-hit melee kill. And the final episode held a weapon exclusive to World Tour, the incinerator, which was pretty much a flamethrower. Oh, and Duke's mighty foot/melee attack counted as a weapon. And again, each weapon felt truly unique and varied in effectiveness against enemies. For example, the shrink gun was useless against drones or tanks if I'm not mistaken, but excelled in taking down assault commanders. In addition to Duke's arsenal of guns, he has a decent selection of equipment: a med kit to patch himself up on the go, steroids to make him move super fast for several seconds, a hollow Duke to distract certain enemies, a jetpack, and scuba gear for underwater sections. And did I mention that this game has a ton of enemy variety, from pig cops and chain gun wielding enforcers to the annoying flying octobrains and underwater sharks, in addition to boss fights at the end of every episode. Changing topics, let's talk level design. You definitely had to pay attention to anything out of the ordinary and search every nook and cranny at times to find key cards or buttons needed to progress. And while it didn't happen too often, I did get lost at times and did have to look up a couple tutorials just due to not knowing what on earth I was supposed to be doing. But other than this, I'd say the level design is great. And the soundtrack is great, with amazing sound effects and the legendary voice of John St. John as Duke. And there was one thing I take as an Easter egg where Duke can talk into a radio station's microphone on one level, likely a nod to John's early career as a radio announcer. although I do wish there was some way to increase voice volume without increasing sound effects, as it could be a little hard to make out what Duke was saying at times. Graphically, I'm not 100% sure what to really say, as they changed the lighting and made some tweaks for World Tour, but I guess it looked great for its time. Story-wise, Duke fights aliens and saves the world. Boom, straight to the point. On the topic of game length, the first 4 episodes took me about 13.5 hours to beat, and an extra 2-ish hours for the 5th episode, although I could probably shave a couple hours off from this on a second playthrough with the knowledge I have now. Now that being said, I played this game on easy difficulty, and even with that, the game proved rather challenging at times, but I do plan to do a normal difficulty playthrough someday, and I did play a couple levels on the normal Let's Rock difficulty before I began writing my review. Now performance-wise, I encountered a bug a few times where I would just randomly die with no explanation, and I read on a Steam review that someone else encountered this bug as well. Not a huge issue, as it wasn't super frequent, but it happened enough times that's worth shining some light on. But other than this, the game ran fine. Final notes I want to add. 1. The controller support was flawless, and 2. I'm assuming this wasn't in the original game, but World Tour has a feature where, upon death, you can travel back to any point in the level and restart from there. A nice tool, although I seldom used it as I saved the game a lot. In conclusion, I think this game earns a 9.7 out of 10 from me, and would likely be a 9.8 out of 10 if it wasn't for the bugs I mentioned where I would just randomly die at times. So yeah, hail to the king, baby. And this is a great game that I had a lot of fun with, and I hope to review more Duke games in the near future. A couple similar games I could suggest you play if you haven't would be the original Quake and the surprisingly fun Super 3D Noah's Ark, which is usually pretty cheap on sale. Well everyone, that is all from me for today. I hope someone enjoyed my review. Thanks for watching. For anybody new to my channel, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, so feel free to check out some of my other content if that maybe sounds interesting. Always remember that Jesus loves you all very much. Hope everyone has a blessed day. Peace.
Much better.